Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to 20 Minute Money, the YouTube channel dedicated to making financial knowledge and wealth building accessible to everyone. Today, I'd like to walk you through a framework for building true wealth that has worked for me and my family. It was developed over many years by studying and trying to emulate the people that I admire, and I'm happy to share it with you today. So before we jump in, just a little bit of what is a framework and why should I care about that? For me, having a framework for building wealth is like having a plan or a blueprint. So it helps to organize a lot of different concepts that might feel complicated into a simple way that helps you see kind of over the horizon. An architect wouldn't just start building a house without a blueprint, just like you shouldn't start really on the road to building true wealth without having a framework to guide your journey. So, a couple of different things to think about here. One, there's an American proverb that I've read over the years that I think just puts the essence of this out there. Those that do not have a plan for their life end up part of someone else's plan. So really, I think this framework can be used. True wealth isn't just about how much money you have, and you'll see in a little bit, it's about how you live your life, how you live by principles, things like that. So really important to have a plan, have a direction, and kind of execute against that. Here's another side of this. Last year, the Federal Reserve released a study that showed that really about 40% of the country, which means 60% of the country could, if they had a $400 emergency in their life, they could handle it with cash on hand. 40% of the population said they couldn't. Now, you can see by this stat that's popping up here, that's gotten better over time. And really, it was a function of coming out of the recession. People cleaned up their lives, got their finances in order, et cetera. But still, 40% of people could not handle a $400 emergency with cash or cash equivalents on hand, meaning that they have to turn to things like credit cards, borrowing from other people, selling something, and eventually just not paying for it at all. So to me, a lot of people out there, and this is 2019 pre all of this craziness happening in the economy, et cetera. So I think this could be very relevant information for a lot of you out there, and I hope that it is. So now that we have a sense of, really why a framework is important and that many of us are not alone in seeking a more stable financial life, let me share with you the framework that I use to build true wealth in my life. So step one of the framework is concerned with really who you are. And it's absolutely the most important step, like the foundation of a home. So, we talked about the blueprint with the architect before. You need to have that foundation built. And if it's not rock solid and stable, the rest of what comes afterwards will really be limited and most likely not as enjoyable for you. So, a lot of people will ask me about building wealth, and usually what they ask me about are stock tips, where the interest rates are going, whether the market has bottomed or not. And, those are interesting questions. Those are important questions, but it's not the most important element of building true wealth. So, want to highlight this one for you. So how you live your life, who you are as a person, kind of break it down into two pieces. One is inspiration. So what makes you truly happy and how far are you willing to go to make that happen? This will really serve as motivation for you along your path, and it must be answered honestly. So for me, inspiration first came from the desire to play music for a living, which any musician watching will tell you is not the most financially lucrative career choice. And you can see behind me, I kind of put my wall of guitars up behind me here tonight to show you that how important music is. But it's also now evolved to include raising a family with my wonderful wife. But whatever that inspirational goal is, who you want to be, who you truly are, how do you really commit to that? And that's part of this first step. The second step is character. So how do you treat others in your life? And do you deal honestly with others? And, what I would say is there's a lot of different quotes out there, definitions of character. We'll get into all of these in future videos. But now just trying to paint the picture for you. So those two kind of components of how you live your life are what really constitutes step one here. The remaining elements will end up amplifying the first element. So how you build your foundation will determine the ultimate outcome of your wealth journey. So true wealth certainly requires the next two elements, but I know many people with more money than most who are really miserable, and many people without much who are some of the greatest people I know. So, the next two steps are really going to be amplified by what you do in this first step. So step number two focuses on how you earn. So for the vast majority of us, this really means selling your time in exchange for currency. So you go do work, you get a paycheck. And your paycheck then represents what I'll call your revenue or your gross earnings. And you'll start to see the correlation between personal finance and maybe a company's finance. It's very much the same. And a lot of people, a lot of you out there might work for a company, et cetera. You've got to treat your personal finances just like you would the company's finances at the end of the day. So your revenues, your earnings, your gross earnings, that's really what comes in. That's what you get for selling your time in whatever occupation you have. And hopefully a lot of you out there, your occupation is kind of tied to that first step, and you're lucky enough to do what you love for a living and make a living off of it. So congrats if that's you. From that, you have to pay bills and other expenses in your life. So that's a big portion of this too. And what's left over is your savings. So developing a savings habit is absolutely critical to finding true wealth. And, just to kind of go over this step two again, there's two levers you can pull. One is the revenue side. So this doesn't have a cap on it. The cool thing about revenue is it's unlimited. You can make as much money. There's no law in the US, at least right now, that says you can't make enough money, right? That doesn't mean, you have to go out and try to, but the moral of this one is you could do a side hustle. You could think about other ways to generate gross earnings and bring money in. So we'll talk a lot more about that in future videos. And then the other lever is expenses. So there are a lot of talking heads out there who preach about all these different ways to save. And the reality is that there are many ways to skin a cat. And in future videos, we'll also dive into all of these elements with practical tips I have to use to manage expenses in my life. But today, it's about just outlining the framework. So I love quotes. Benjamin Franklin, he has a famous quote that says, "If you know how to spend less than you get, you have the philosopher's stone." So delaying gratification today for something tomorrow is really unnatural. And for a lot of us, it's very difficult. It takes practice, and we'll cover some strategies I've used in my life in future episodes, along with diving deeper into each step of the framework. So then that brings us to element number three, and that's how you invest. So like we talked about in step two, you have to have savings in order to get to step three. Your savings eventually turn into your investments. So the components of investing and how you invest, first is assets, represent investments you own that pay you. It's really important. They pay you. So in my mind, this does not include your home. Unless you charge your spouse or your kids rent, it doesn't include your home. So assets for me are either paper assets, private businesses, real estate, or commodities, and they must pay you. That's key. The second piece of this are liabilities. So those are obligations you have to pay other people's or entities. So these aren't expenses. They do turn into expenses, but at the end of the day, your liabilities, a lot of times fund your assets, and then your living expenses are, hopefully part of your income statement personally. So liabilities, obligations you have to pay others. Some liabilities are good when they're used to finance assets at reasonable interest rates. When it's used for consumption, that's where most people get into trouble. And again, we'll talk much more about that in future videos. So assets minus liabilities, that's your net worth. You hear a lot of people talk about what's your net worth. This person's net worth is whatever it might be. Did you see Bill Gates moved up on the fortune list? So that's really what they're talking about when it comes to net worth. So I hope you found this information useful. For those of you who are looking to make more progress in achieving true wealth, I'm grateful you took this first step or next step with me. And I've included a link to my website where you can download a free infographic of the True Wealth Framework. I'll also plan to dive much deeper into each step of the framework over time to help bring you strategies and ideas to find true wealth. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to be notified when new content is uploaded, and really appreciate you checking it out. Thanks.